while we're waiting for a few more people to come in, as you're entering, please put in your temperature in Celsius or Fahrenheit where you were at.
Not your temperature.
Not your
This is not COVID screening. This is not COVID screening.
We want you to leave if you've got a high temperature.
Thank you to another smart-ass edition of Every Other Wednesday. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Kerr. Welcome to this exciting gluten-free edition of Every Other Wednesday. I would like to introduce my cohorts today. We're missing the lovely Sanjay this morning, but he will be back, I think, next time. So to my left anyways, Richard, why don't you introduce yourself very quickly?
Hi, I'm Richard Haddon. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, where it is 70 degrees, but it's the warmest it's been in about 3 weeks, to be honest, right now. So I know I'm not going to get any sympathy from anyone. Anyway, I am the co-author of Contented Cows Still Give Better Milk and other things. So glad to be here. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Richard. And Mr. Tobe.
Michael, Richard didn't get the memo that Stephen Rayfield is taking his place. Didn't we say that?
Oh, yeah, we forgot. Our guest host from last time around.
Yeah, exactly.
Apparently Stephen didn't get the memo either.
No, exactly. He didn't show up, so I'm glad you're here, Richard. I'm Jeff Tobe. Okay. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I have no idea, except we're expecting 6 inches of snow, and everybody's panicked. I have no idea because I haven't been out today what the temperature is. But good to be here. And author of Coloring Outside. Whoops, wrong way. Coloring Outside the Lines.
You were just coloring outside the lines, literally.
Well, the end book there is also Coloring Outside the Lines, but it's the India version, believe it or not. So.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. We're a little low on it. People are chiming in here. So it's good to see everybody.
Michael, that brings up another question that perhaps we could get people to answer in the chat box, and that is, did you receive either or both of the reminders yesterday from Zoom, not the other one, but the one yesterday from Zoom that you should have gotten about 24 hours in advance? And did you get the reminder from today? Somebody is saying no reminders. Yes, received both. Well, that's very, that tells us nothing. Thank you so much for answering.
And can I just point out, Kim says it's minus 41 in Regina.
Yes.
OMG. That's all I can say. Holy moly.
Yes, and yes. All right. So yeah, it seems like there was some sort of a glitch. So we apologize for that. Some people seem to have not gotten it, and some people did.
And you still showed up. So.
That's very helpful. I will be talking with our account executive at Zoom this afternoon to find out why that happened.
Let's dive in here. Thanks everybody. So 2 weeks ago, we had a guest star with us. We were missing the lovely Richard, and we talked about customer experience and the importance of customer experience and how to ramp up your customer experience from a cultural point of view. So if you're excited about that topic, there was lots of great info there. Do look at the recording on the Every Other Wednesday website. Today, we are talking about creating a culture of innovation and creativity and how you do that. And so in honor of today's topic, we are giving away a door prize right away here. One of Jeff's famous books that he just referenced, the wrong way again, Coloring Outside the Lines. And the winner is, because we kind of tricked you here by asking the temperature. We are going to warm up somebody. We are going to warm up the person who is the coldest. And by my accounting, that was Stacy in Barhead, who came in with minus 45.
Wow.
With the wind chill factor.
So
now
Stacey,
some of you are thinking, oh, damn, I didn't include the wind chill factor. That's not fair. I was just going with the absolute, but
Stacy, my email's on the screen. Just email me and with your physical address, and I'll send it to you. Even in, where is it? Barhead, Alberta.
Barhead, Alberta.
Do they have mail there, or is it?
That's not very nice. Of course they have mail there.
Okay.
Barhead's an awesome place.
They just don't have warmth.
Okay.
They just don't have warmth. So we're talking, gentlemen, everybody, and please put your questions as always in the chat box. Richard's the chat herder today. We're talking about creating a culture of creativity innovation. And here's my first question for the panelists. We often tend to, I think, use those words interchangeably, creativity and innovation. But there is, I think, an important distinction. So I want to get your thoughts on what that distinction is, And also throw in another term that's become hot as of the last sort of 5-6 years, and that term is disruption. And I think you gentlemen as speakers probably saw that trend too. I don't know when it started, but I can't tell you the number of Speaker Bureau agents who started telling me, can you put the word disruption in your title when you're talking about change management or creativity? Because it became this hot topic. Everyone wanted to talk about disruption. So how do those three terms relate to one another? How are they different? Richard, kick us off here.
Well, one of my favorite subjects in high school was Latin, and people deride me for having taken Latin. But I want you to know that I have 2 trophies in my house, 2 Latin trophies for Latin derivatives, understanding English words and where they came from in Latin. So I went straight to that body of knowledge to look at creativity, innovation, and disruption. And it won't surprise anybody to know the roots of these, but I think it's important to think about the roots. Creativity, create, comes from the Latin root that simply means to form out of nothing. So let's put a pin in that. Create, to form out of nothing. It wasn't there, now we've created it. Innovate means to make new, to make new. And it really means, because of the N that's at the beginning of it, to introduce something for the first time as new. Now, if you take the word renovate, that means to make it new again. Makes sense, right? You see why I was so good at this in Latin. But then disrupt means to break, or the rupt means to break. Disrupt means to break apart. And so those really do mean different things. And so I think we probably use innovate correctly, and I think we may use create or creativity incorrectly, because I don't know, when I hear creativity, of course, Jeff, this is your real area. When you hear creativity, it's people doing things weird and different and like never before. But I think creativity just simply means doing something, creating something. Innovation is what we often talk about as we've not done it this way before. We've not done this way before. And then disrupt, I have my own view about that. And I think we don't really use disrupt or disruption in the right way. I think we use it a little bit like what you alluded to a minute ago, Mike, and that is, okay, so we're tired of the word creativity and innovation. Let's come up with a new word, disruption. And it'll make us sound hipper and cooler and edgier. But I would just say we need to use these words as they are really meant. And if we are really breaking something, completely destroying it and starting all over, maybe that is disruption.
Cool. Excellent. I love your introduction of Latin there. Very enlightening, young man. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Mine is less enlightened. How's that? Surprise. Listen, you don't look at a company like Microsoft or Amazon and you say, oh, what a creative company. What do we say?
Right.
What a innovative company. Why? Right. Because creativity, as human beings, we all have the ability to create, coming up with new ideas, even possibly new ways of doing things. And innovation is the profitable implementation of those ideas. And profitable doesn't have to mean money, all right? It just means that it benefits somebody or it makes somebody's life better. So when we look at creativity, I always say, look at it as 2 words. There's create and there's ivity, right? And it's the ivity that's the hard part. It's the risk-taking. It's the implementation. Now, when you go to disruption, I tend to disagree with you, Richard. I think that there are some real disruptors in the world. I mean, look at Airbnb and look at in Canada, Cirque du Soleil. These are all blue ocean strategies. Yeah.
But let me just interrupt it. But I'm wondering if disruption is just another part of the continuum at a higher level of the continuum.
This is where I was going. I think they're still innovative. And I think maybe innovation used to be the goal at the end of that continuum, but now the continuum has stretched and innovation's here, and out here is disruption. So I think very few companies have taken the extra leap, but if they disrupted an industry, if they change the way that industry does business, then I believe they truly are disruptors.
It goes along with the breaking thing, kind of breaking the mold, breaking the way it was done before.
Yeah, breaking the old ways of doing things. That's an awesome way of looking at it. I know some of my clients almost use the term disruption to in lieu of change management, right? Which to me always sounds, I don't know about you guys, but when people bring up the topic of change management, it always sounds so 1990s to me.
Right.
Teenage,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like a Fred Pryor seminar on change management. You know, I think if you're in leadership, you are in the business of change management, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's
But
not a one-off event.
yeah, it's interesting that we use disruptive almost like a badge, right? It's like when we were in school, the last thing we wanted to be, and I'm aging myself, was disruptive. God, don't put that on my report card. Maybe shit disturber is a good word. Is a good word when we were young, but it's just taken this other meaning, and it's almost like this badge of recognition to be a disruptor. But not everybody is, and very few are.
And your timing is perfect, Jeff, because Carol just chimed in the chat box with how disrupting can have a negative connotation. And that's very true, right? Whereas now we think of it as a very positive, it's a bold, courageous stance to take if you are a disruptor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I remind people that change your the go-to to all panelists and attendees? We're still getting some things to only panelists.
So let me ask you this, and maybe it's an obvious question, but maybe not. I think there's more tentacles to this answer than we perhaps realize. Why is this important in companies? Why is it important that organizations become intentional about creating a culture that supports creativity, which leads to innovation?
I know.
Yes, young man in the glasses.
Oh, thanks. Okay, good.
Sorry, young man in the blue shirt.
He said young man in the glasses.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah. I think it's because people and the markets get bored easily. I think people are bored easily, and they're looking for something new. Even if it does the same thing, they want a little different flavor. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. No. So constantly offering your customers new options, new services, new products. Jeff.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of survival, and Rhonda hit it right on, and it's growth, right? Thank you for that, because I think that it's about change. If I were to ask anybody, how long you've been doing what you do, and a lot of us have been doing it for a long time. There was a study done very quickly, a study done 1988, before most of our listeners were born. But it was SMU Business School, and they studied change in major industries and professions, Canada, the US, and they found that you went through a major change in the way you did business every 3 years. Well, they redone the study for the fourth time, and they found in general, it's now been reduced to 7 months. How can we not be creative, right? It means that something you're doing right now, it's standard practice, it just works for you, is going to change drastically over the next 7 months. So that creativity, I'll give you just some quick reasons. One, it sets us apart from everybody else who professes to be in the same business. Two, it keeps us on top of that change that's happening no matter what we do for a living. And the third part, it's fun. I mean, wouldn't you agree with me? People want to do business with, they want to work with people who seem to like what they do for a living. So
yeah, and
there's so many reasons to be creative. I got lots more, but
I would dovetail on that, Jeff, too. And this whole idea, when we talk about change, here's one thing I always stress to my clients is that if the pace of change inside your organization does not keep up to or exceed the pace of change on the outside of your company, it's just a matter of time before you're going to become the next blockbuster.
Right.
So creativity and innovation is necessary just to keep up with the pace of change. But beyond that, here's an important reason, and you touched on it with that third point, I think, Jeff, is the idea that it's not only fun, and in fact, there's been studies, I think this is very cool, where it's shown that you can almost dampen people's creative spirit by offering them financial awards to be creative, because it's such an intrinsic motivator in all of us to be creative that it actually backfires when we say, hey, we'll give $1,000 prize to whoever comes up with the most creative slogan or poster or whatever it may be. So there is that fun element to it, right? Ha plus ha equals a ha. Absolutely. And the reverse is also true. But another really important reason in my books, beyond just the survival, the business aspect of it, I think it is a key driver of employee engagement. Absolutely. And we've talked about this before, and every other Wednesday, to name one of many, the famous Marshall Goldsmith study, where he suggests that the number one thing employees want from their workplace is just to be asked for their ideas, right? When we ask our employees for ideas, It's one of the most powerful engagement tools we've got. It makes them co-owners in our business, co-owners of the future in their organization. It sends the message that we value their experience, their wisdom, their judgment. It is so important. So all of this stuff ties together.
You know, I find so many organizations who say, we're just not creative. You know, we're engineers, or we're, government employees. We're just not creative. And I say, bull. You know, I think that.
So you say more than Jeff, because I've heard you say it. But anyway, carry on.
That's only to you guys. But it's so important to understand that everyone is creative. It's like an athletic ability. You know, I'm not great at basketball, but I can shoot a basketball kind of thing, and I could probably get better if I practice. So I think
that goes along with the definition of creative, not necessarily meaning wild and wacky and weird. Yeah. It's that you did something, you created something. Everybody can create something.
Yeah, there you go. There's wild, wacky, and weird. Or it doesn't mean sitting down at a potter's wheel and making a beautiful bowl, because we connect creativity with the fine arts. You know, don't we? I mean, that's what we think of. I can't paint, I can't sketch, I can't draw. I'm just not creative. But the first step is in creating a culture that accepts creativity is allowing people to understand they are creative.
So perfect segue, Jeff, to my next question. And I want to pose this question to the audience. I've got my light bulb hat on. No, it's not a chef's hat. It's a giant light bulb.
Is that what that is? I thought you were getting ready to make a souffle or something.
No. So I want to know, in the chat box, folks, please put in, where are you? What do you tend to be doing in life when you come up with your light bulb moments? What's going on? What are you doing? Where are you?
I can tell you, but it's probably TMI of mine.
When the light bulb moments come on. In the shower. Middle of the night.
Yeah.
Trying to fall asleep. That's me trying to fall asleep on my morning walk in the middle of the night in the shower. We have a lot of clean people on the call today. Yeah. Used to be smoking. Now it's sleeping. Okay.
Aaron Sorkin, who is the creator, writer of The West Wing and the Social Network movie and many great movies, the screenwriter, he talks about how as soon as he gets a little bit of writer's block, he goes into the shower. Yeah. To get his juices going again. There's a whole science behind that. It's fascinating. So the reason I asked this,
I would have a skin condition if I did that every time I run into writer's block.
So the reason I asked this is, and I posed this question, I've done surveys, like huge surveys for 20 years on this question, and everybody's hitting on the top answers that show up. The top 5 that tend to always show up: in the shower, driving, falling asleep or in bed, exercising, so walking, any kind of exercise. And the last one that I don't think anyone mentioned, in the washroom, sitting on the...
That's what I was trying to say, but
the TMI, yes.
I'll translate that. That means bathroom, okay? It's washroom. Not the laundry room.
Got it.
Yeah. So my point in that is it always makes me laugh, because what never shows up on any survey I've seen, work. So evidently work is where ideas go to die, which is again why we have to be intentional about this. So gentlemen, what is killing creativity in organizations? What are we doing in our companies that is blocking ideas, that is blocking the flow of creativity and innovation?
Well, I think that's a really interesting point that you bring. I mean, I was kind of coming to that conclusion as you were sharing that. I was thinking, when people are creative, it's when their mind is not actively engaged in something really else. I mean, yeah, driving, it should be a little bit engaged, but it's when you're but no, I'm getting somewhere. I'm getting somewhere. And so, yeah. And so if you're at your desk, if you're at your work and you say, okay, I'm going to be creative, I think maybe we're asking too much of ourselves when we do that. And maybe we should take whatever creative inspiration we get when we get it and take advantage of it then. But to answer your question, I mean, I think some of the things that keep us from being engaged is obviously just the old, we've always done it this way before kind of thinking. But I really think bureaucracy and rules and things that we haven't really thought through that are there not to serve creativity, but to serve some other function on the organization. I think that's a huge thing that limits creativity. I see people who have creative ideas as, oh, they'll never let me think. They'll never let me do that. And so it just keeps kind of pushing it down.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Richard. Jeff, from a cultural point of view, though,
Yeah.
what's
Well,
blocking us at
it's
a
not a
cultural
cultural point of view because let me just jump on what Richard said first, and that is that I think before work, I think it's a personal mindset. And so we convince ourselves we're not creative. We convince ourselves we don't work in a creative environment, and so we're not, right? And part of the work part of it is exactly what you said. It's TTWWADI, which is that's the way we've always done it mentality. So I think that's part of what's squashing creativity. But I was jokingly, on my phone, which I would never do to you guys. But the point is, I think we're so into our devices nowadays that it truly, I believe it stifles creativity, especially in kids. I think that if you think watching a video and scrolling, and it doesn't give them time to think and imagine. We haven't even brought the word in imagine, to creativity. And it's the same thing with work. So when we get back to culture, do we give our people time to imagine? Do we give them time to be creative? I believe you should create a culture where time is set aside for people to be creative, whatever that means. Even if it's 15 minutes a week, whatever it is, that I want you just to sit and think about new ways we could do things. Look at our business from a different perspective. It's only going to help the business or the organization.
Yeah, for sure.
Mike, to get back to your question about the cultural aspect of this, I mean, that's what I was referring to. I probably wasn't clear enough about that. If we have a culture of rules, a culture of don't, a culture of can't, and things like that, which, I don't want to stereotype, but some would say that some governmental organizations tend to be characterized by more of that kind of a culture than, say, an Apple or a Microsoft or an Airbnb or something like that. So I think if our culture is one that has taught us what we shouldn't do and what we can't do and what we mustn't do, that is going to interfere with our ability to be creative, innovative, and disruptive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for everybody listening to this again, I think we would all agree here that culture has a huge role in this, right? If there's so many different layers to this topic. I mean, cultures that stifle communication, that don't have open and honest communication, it's really hard to be creative and innovative when there's not open and honest communication. When you have micromanaging bosses, it's really hard to be creative. If you've created, and Richard, you were maybe alluding to this, a risk-adverse culture, if you are hiring everybody who's the same as you, so you're hiring a bunch of clones and you're not bringing anyone with any different perspectives, because who wouldn't want to hire more of you? You're brilliant, right? We get that. But as the old saying goes, if you've got two executives or two employees who think alike, one of them might be redundant. So everything from hiring to training to the mindset that we encourage in our companies, how we run our meetings, how we even promote and reward and recognize people, all of that stuff has an impact ultimately on creativity and innovation.
I think organizations culturally have to realize that creativity takes time. So they think that, well, let's go to the boardroom and brainstorm and we'll come up with a solution, where you really have to upload. And then there's also this feeling, and I have a saying that I use that I can get into big trouble, but I feel safe here. So ready?
It's a safe space.
Premature evaluation prevents conception. Okay. And so I think there's too many companies that have that culture of give me an idea, let's run with it kind of thing, where creativity takes time. We need to give our people time to upload it. Our brains are amazing things. Even when we're not working on a problem, we're still working on a problem. That's why we wake up in the middle of the night and go, I know exactly what to do, right? Because our brain is working on it. So.
Right.
Hey, we have some very creative and innovative people on our call today, and they are making some contributions in chat. I want to summarize a few of those right now. And there's one, Carol says, I used to keep an erasable marker in the shower so I could write on the. I have two questions, Carol. Carol, why did you take it down? But yeah, I think that's great. And then somebody's agreeing, yeah, policy can hold us back. Rhonda says, at work we're heads down getting our jobs done, which doesn't always allow time to come up with new methods and processes. There's a lot of
we have to give
a lot of talk about here about being task oriented, what you what you want to do. And it reminds me of a situation 100 or so years ago when I was first starting in a professional career, and I worked for a software development company, and my job was to design software. And my boss came in and told me one day, and I was very young, and I had just come from working from like one of the most enormous corporations in the world, where you were not allowed to be creative or innovative or do anything that didn't look like your head was down working all the time. And my boss said, I need to see you. When I walk by your office, I need to see you gazing at the ceiling from time to time. And he gave me the freedom and the flexibility to do that. Now, it took a little while for me to discipline myself away from the discipline of always, be doing something like this. But I tell you, when I did, I was able to really open up my mind. And then the folks who worked with me, we were able to create some pretty cool things.
That's awesome, right? And I think we have to overtly say to our employees, we do pay you to think around here.
Yeah.
Right? We have to send that message. And Jeff, I want to touch on that because that is so important too, right? You have that premature judging of ideas.
Evaluation.
That quick fix, that seagull voice that comes out from everyone immediately, right? That'll never work. We tried it in 1972. It's against our policy. We don't have the money. We don't have the time. And we crap all over each other's ideas. So again, it goes to that environment. One phrase I haven't heard us say yet that I think is critically important before I move on to the next question. And I forget where this was, but I remember reading an article where like 70 experts on creativity were asked what was the most important factor in terms of a culture of creativity and innovation. And the number one answer by far was you need to create psychological safety for all your employees. It has to be psychologically safe to bring up outrageous ideas, to question things, to challenge things, to share ideas without any fear of retribution or criticism or people laughing at you in the wrong way. I want to move on to the next question.
No, before we do, can you do the seagull again? Okay. And by the way, you have a hair out of place, and I know that would drive you crazy.
Oh, it's always that. Only one? That would be a miracle for me. Holy smokes, I'm glad with that. So, okay, so
I wish I had some better animal imitations. Anyway, go ahead.
I actually have a list, and if anybody wants them, I have a list somewhere. I think I've got an article on my website of a whole list of things that might block creativity. But let's flip that around now. What supports creativity then? What do we need to do to keep the flow of ideas, to keep creativity and innovation alive and thriving in our workplaces? Jeff, start us off.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is perspective. So we have to create a culture where we allow people to look at what we do from a different perspective. I once heard a sales trainer say, if you see the world through your customer's eyes, you'll see the way your customer buys. And I use that all the time in my consulting and training and speaking, because to me, forget the word customer. We're not talking about sales here, but it could be an internal customer. It doesn't matter. So let's talk internally for a minute. I think it's incredibly important to give people the opportunity to look at it from a different perspective. What do I mean? I have a client who I just talked to this morning, so it's perfect timing. They're in Houston, and I had suggested, well, we had talked over a year ago. I haven't heard from them in a year. And this is the VP of HR calling me, very large company, who said, we've instituted for 2021 field trips. And I go, well, what's a field trip? And it's exactly, remember when we were kids and our teacher came in and said, we're going to go outside by the big oak in the playground, and it changed your perspective. They're taking teams are going, or departments are going on field trips, some to their clients' offices, just to see how their product is used at the clients. Some are taking them they have total creative freedom. Some managers are taking them to offsite to restaurants to look at the customer experience. Or to me, that's where we start to allow our people to have a different perspective.
That's brilliant, Jeff. And in one of my newsletters last fall, I think I wrote an article about a company very similar to that. I think a bank, where every year they do a field trip. Each team gets a budget. I think it's like $500. They go out into just downtown into the community, and they have to take photos. They go into different businesses. They interact, and they just look for ideas. They look for ideas on signs, on marketing, and customer service. They have to come back. They have to debrief and report. And they tie in all sorts of prizes and they make it a really fun thing, but it is an inspiration hunt essentially, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Frederick in the chat offers, I think, some really kind of good advice around what you guys have just talked about. He puts it in a little bit different way. He says, regularly put yourself in new environments. And that's really what you're talking about, Jeff. He says, but I love this, is it's not just at work. Try new foods, listen to new music, walk on new paths, talk to a new friend. And I think, I don't know, Jeff, you know more about this than I do about brain stuff, but doesn't that maybe disrupt some of the patterns in our brain and allow us to kind of stir things up to be more creative?
Can I give a challenge to our listeners, our viewers? I want you to try something. Guys, I want you to try this tonight too, if this applies to you. You know, how many of you sit at the same seat every single night for dinner? So tonight, and especially if you have younger kids, I did this with my kids when they were about maybe 10 and 8, so many years ago. And one of my daughters pointed out that we always sit in the same seats. So I said, okay, tonight we're going to switch seats. And then my oldest daughter at 10 years old said, and whoever seat you sit in, you have to play them throughout the meal. And she proceeded to burp through the entire, sat in my seat and proceeded to burp through the entire meal. And that gives you some sense of perspective.
Oh, imagine doing that in a meeting situation where everyone, if people sit in the same seats, you know, Susan now sits in the CEO's chair and pretends to act like the CEO.
I will tell you that the corollary to that is my wife and I once said, we always sleep on the same side of the bed. Let's switch. We lasted like 3 minutes. That's it. I just can't do it.
So the change of perspective idea is incredibly important too from a cultural point of view and in a meeting, right? So one of the things, you know, how do we change perspective? Because that is the heart of creativity. Creativity is about looking at something in a new way, getting on the other side of it, right? If you have all the same, look at it this way, you hire the same people, you all have the same background, same ethnicity, you went to the same school, you read the same books, you went blah, 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 blah. What are you all going to see when you look at a challenge or a problem? Probably the same things, right? Very similar things. So creativity is about forcing a change of perspective. So how can you do that? Number of ways. You can change the question that you're asking. Always change the question up. Bring in outsiders into your meetings, into your brainstorming meetings. Bring in kids, as some companies do. Bring in people from other departments that have no baggage, no experience related to the topic that you're discussing for a totally fresh outside perspective. Bring in clients. So do something to disrupt that pattern and force yourself to change perspective. And it could be as simple as meeting in a place you don't usually meet, meeting at a different time. There's all sorts of ways. Humor is a perspective changer. And that's why we know from so many studies, ha plus ha equals aha. Yeah. Richard, you wanted to chime in.
Michael, don't you think that to do that without any specific expectations of what the result's going to be probably opens it up to even more creativity? You know, to say, we're going to go to a different place so that we can be creative. No, let's just go to a different place and see what happens. And it might be that way. I also think, and this isn't very creative, but I think it answers the question. We know that anything we want to foster, we have to measure it and reward it. So I think we have to find a way to some degree, measure creativity and innovation and find a way to reward creativity and innovation. And just like anything else, if we do that, it's going to send people in, toward that behavior. Yeah. But I think we also have to create an environment, a culture where people do not fear being innovative. And we referred to that a few minutes ago, but I think we have to be specific and say, right, don't be afraid to be innovative. You can make a mistake, you can screw up, you can totally bomb on this, and you're not going to experience any negative consequences for it.
Richard, you hit on an incredibly important point in my mind. To me, this is a dividing point in so many company cultures, is that point where somebody screws up in a smart way. I'm not talking about illegal behavior, fraudulent behavior, or
immoral.
In the spirit of doing something new, in the spirit
of the head, not mistakes of the heart.
Correct. Yes. Thank you. In the spirit of trying something new, it doesn't work out. That becomes a defining moment that defines company culture in so many different companies. In innovative, truly innovative, rocking cultures, those people get rewarded and recognized, even though the idea didn't pan out. So the versus getting punished for trying something new.
The words we haven't come out is that risk taking factor.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a big part of culture as well. And sometimes it's just perception, isn't it? It's not even real that it's a risk, but it's very risky to some people. So it's, again, giving them that permission to take that risk. I think that's a key as well.
Yeah, thank
Richard,
you.
we've got great comments.
There's so
I know.
many.
A lot of it has to do with mobile cheese. Yeah. I was at company lunch, got up to go to the restroom. When I came back, everyone had switched sides of the table and pulled a fast one.
Yeah, Carol,
Yeah,
I'm sorry we did that to you. So.
And that's a really important point too, Jeff. That takes us back to the difference between creativity and innovation and risk.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's what I remind audiences of all the time. When you're just talking about the creativity aspect of this, when you're just talking about coming up with ideas, the risk should be zero.
There's no risk.
There's no risk. All you're doing is sharing an idea. So the risk, but you have to still work at this. You have to build that psychological safety. The risk should be zero because you haven't implemented anything yet. You haven't done anything yet. At that point, you have to diligently work at creating a risk-free environment. When you get into the innovation and actually implementing, that's where there can be some risk, but you talk about that, you mitigate that, you talk about plan Bs. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, but think about the risk when we go to disruption, right? There's a huge risk there. And so,
well,
you know.
But let's also remind folks there's a bigger risk often. You know, this is a cliche, right? But it's true. There's a bigger risk in not doing anything, in not changing, in not innovating.
You know, it reminds me how many of us have been in things that were called brainstorming sessions. Yeah. And the facilitator said, now all ideas can be put on the table. This is not the time to edit those ideas or filter or evaluate those ideas. Let's just get them out all on the table. But our brains are programmed that if we think it's silly or ridiculous, we don't want it to come out of our mouths because we don't want to be associated with it. And I think when we're having brainstorming sessions or even, you know, something that's not necessarily couched in those terms, we really, as you said, we got to make sure it is zero risk. You can say something absolutely absurd and that nobody is, you know, that we know is not going to work. But the fact of expressing it there might be something else back there that can come out.
Right, right.
You know, I got to jump on that and just say, part of me feels, and I do a lot of brainstorm sessions, as you know, with the organizations, and part of me feels there is such a thing as a bad idea. You know, I think there has to be some, I always say it's okay to color outside the lines as long as you don't fall off the page, right? And so it can't just be pie in the sky, and you'll hear this a lot, just crazy ideas. Okay, I get that, but we got, as long as you've got a time limit, you've got to keep people kind of in the line. So
I think though, it comes down to what part of the process you're at, right?
Right. No, it's true.
You do not want to step on people's creativity at all in that initial phase, right?
No,
it's so dangerous.
Right. Yeah.
Again, because there might be something good. It might be clogged by that bad idea, the good idea that's in the back. Carol is asking us for a number, and the number is what percent of companies do you think embrace the ideas we're talking about versus the companies that do things the same old way?
3%.
I have no idea.
Oh,
Carol,
no, it's a study I just did. I did it this morning.
Glad you know.
No, I'm kidding. I would definitely say there's no, I can't tell you the number, but it seems to me, and I'm sure you guys agree, that it's less than there are companies who don't do it that way. And by the way, companies that don't do it that way, or organizations can still be successful at what they do. We're not
just
saying
not through creativity.
That's exactly right.
So what number did you say, Jeff?
I'm just saying less than 50%.
Less than 50%.
I think what percentage of companies do you think embrace these great ideas? I would guess 20%, if that. So.
That would be my
Yeah.
Level instinct. Another topic, and we're running out of time here very rapidly. We're not going to get time to the last question, but in terms of helping ideas too, I'm a huge believer in the need to create cultures that embrace questions, creating a culture of curiosity. Questions drive the creative process. They're the start of the creative process. Questions drive everything. So you, again, have to create that psychologically safe space where people can ask any question that comes up, but also where you're asking questions all the time. Back to that old, what do you think employs? Having a question of the month, where you get everybody thinking about a specific question for a month. Having a question jar where you kick off your meetings with some outrageous question, changing up the question. So asking unusual questions to look at things from a different angle, from a different perspective, right? Is it okay to smoke while you pray? 90% of the people say no. Is it okay to pray while you smoke? 90% of the people say yes. Change the question, you change the results. So we've got to create a culture of questioning.
I agree. And let's narrow it down even. If that's not possible, because it sounds so broad, how about just creating that psychological space as you talked about, Michael, where it's okay to ask why. and I'm big on the why. Why do we do it this way? And I guess there's two. Why not try it this way? Or what if we tried it this way? But you know, there's a methodology called the 5 whys to get to a root cause of a problem. And in problem solving, I happen to love that, even better than brainstorming. I think it's amazing to ask, are we working on the right problem? Right? And so the only way you do that is why? And if you can't ask it 5 times, it's okay to ask it just more than once. But very quickly, I remember when I had my advertising agency, we were very creative minds. And so that wasn't a problem. It was the opposite. We asked too many whys and no meeting would ever end and no solution would ever come to fruition until one of my sales manager introduced me to the yellow card in soccer, like a penalty card. I used to stand at the door of my weekly meetings and hand out 3 yellow cards and said, you have 3 whys. So what I'm getting at is you got to know your team as well. Because if you have incredibly creative people, that environment of why is not a big thing, but sometimes we have to rein it in as well. So you need to know your team.
Yeah, and that why technique is so important. Listen, we have to wrap things up. So before I throw it over to Richard, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. As with all of our topics, we barely skimmed the surface. We could probably not stop talking for an hour on this. We could probably spend 45 minutes on just one of those tiny components because there's so much to get in here. We've got one of the big questions we didn't get to, for example, is, okay, you get these brilliant ideas. How do you choose the right idea and how do you turn that idea into action? Yeah. So that will probably be one of our future every other Wednesdays that we can dive into. Yeah. So thank you, everybody.
Can I, and I'll just completely out of context, but can I just mention that we're continuing with our competition. If you want to be a guest host, please email me. Some of you are participating all the time, but you're not sending me an email saying, I want to be guest host. Come on, it's a lot of fun. We'll make fun of you like we make fun of each other. So please email me, Jeff@JeffTobe, and just say, I want to be a guest host sometime this year. All right.
We don't bite. It's fun. It's a safe space.
Michael Armand is asking if your new book has been released.
Yes and no. So I have it in my hot little hands, but unfortunately there was an 11.5 hour, and thank you for the question, Rhonda. There was an 11.5 hour glitch that has messed things up in terms of getting it available through Amazon and all the Kindle and Kobo and the downloadable stuff. But you can order copies through me. And by the way, if any company orders 25 or more of these suckers, because they're written for all your employees, I will give you a free Q&A session on Zoom to debrief on the book.
Okay, can I just tell? 1 minute left. In that 1 minute left, I'm going to thank everybody for being here and say that in 2 weeks, on February the 24th, please join us for every other Wednesday when we will be discussing building a culture of development. In other words, it's not all about climbing the ladder. So that's what we'll be talking about. How do we build a culture that develops people's skills, not necessarily their position in the organization, but it might. Okay, so how's that?
Can I tell Carol she only needs to get dressed from the waist up? That's right. It's just answering one of her concerns.
Like us.
That's right. Okay, everybody. It's been great to have you here. We'll see you on February the 24th. So we'll see you every other Wednesday.
Stay safe, stay warm.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay healthy, everyone.
Yeah, take care.